welcome to lesson number 3 from our Magic Buttons course. So on the lesson number 1, we learned simply how to create diagonal by just stretching your hip away from your rib cage. Then on the lesson number 2, we learned that actually all the actions should contribute to create more stretch for you. So we talk about squeezing, which actually creates more stretch. We talk about the hip and thigh rotation, which should create a little bit even more stretch, and we talk about the knee straightening. Plus, we mentioned that the frame should stay as much as possible in a counter position towards the stretch. Never follow the stretch, but always in a counter way. Now, the lesson number 3, I want you to pay attention on the change from one stretch to another stretch. So this is where we're going to use more terminology of magic button. So for example, put your weight on one of the leg as always, release hip, one leg straight, one leg bent. Now, as we create our beautiful stretch in our body, as we're squeezing our side, rotating our hip, so here we create button. Now, this is your button. So now every movement, action from that start from this button. So after you create stretch, you're gonna press the button in. So what it means, press button in, you press your rib cage in, which actually activate your tummy and activate your hip. And from here, you will have a sense of contraction almost, and then stretching to the other side. The same here. So your movement will start from pressing this little button in. So your rib cage goes out, and then you press it in, which actually create that contraction in your stomach, and that's how we change weight to create stretch on the opposite side of your body. So we're gonna practice now on not only stretching, but also on pressing the magic button itself. And we try with our hands. Put your fingers on your rib cage and try to press your rib cage in gently. Of course, don't hurt yourself. Gently in, and that you will see how your rib cage start going into the tummy. So it's activated like a little bit like a contraction, like almost like you're doing ab exercise, tummy. And that could start our weight transferring. And once we transfer weight, we can start stretching on the opposite side. So the stretch, and then we magic button pressing. Stretch, and then we may call it rib, stomach, hip. Stretch, rib, stomach, hip. Stretch, rib cage through the stomach, and then only hip action. Stretch, rib, hip. Stretch, rib, hip. So you try to focus on two things. The number one, it's how much you stretch. And number two, on how this rib cage goes in and create that chain, almost like a waterfall reaction which travels down. Stretch, in. Stretch, in. Stretch, in. Boom. And stretch, in. Stretch. Now press magic button. In. Stretch. But there is one small thing, is very common mistake. When people start using magic button, very often they're curving that back, and that's not recommended. You want to have your back straight, your spine straight, and as you're pressing your magic button, your rib cage goes inside, but you try to stay as straight as you can before the next stretch. So let's do this exercise, a simple weight change, and this is going to apply to all the dancers, not only some specific dance. This is just a technique, this is just a skill of how to stretch and how to press magic button. So we'll do it for the 8 counts. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. And I always want you to remember, the first we create a stretch, after that we have action. So the stretch means there is a diagonal line between your rib cage and hip, plus we squeeze, we rotate to get it more and more and more. And the action means that you activate, you press your magic button, you activate your rib cage, then hip, and then it's happened to be change for the another one. Okay, so let's go for the 8 counts. And on count and, that's where we're gonna press magic button. And 1. And the number we're gonna stretch. And 2. And 3. And 4. And 5. And 6. And 7. And 8. And. So here I want you to remember that the stretch happening on the number, and then that action is happening on count and. Stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and. So practice this and see you at the next lesson.